To talk a little bit about the Silicon Valley. I didn't mention, but I've lived there for about 30 years. So I did not graduate. I didn't tell my degree. I graduated with an LNS degree in a major that doesn't even exist anymore. It's called American Institutions. And the only claim to fame that we can say is Herb Cole has the same degree. It was a pre-law degree. I ended up going into business. So this is what we're going to touch on today. Some of the points, I'll let you guys look at this really quickly. We want to go through some of these slides so that we can have the opportunity to have you guys ask questions, because you probably have some questions about the Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. Anyway, this is the Silicon Valley. For those of you who don't know, I was telling somebody today about the Silicon Valley, and they said, where is that? Is that near LA? And I said, no, it's actually Northern California. And for those of you who have not traveled to California, it takes an hour by plane to go from San Francisco to LA, and it takes 6 hours by car. So they're not next to each other. All you see on TV is typically, unless it's to show the Silicon Valley, is typically Southern California. But Northern California is a little bit more stable. We think normal people are up in Northern California and interesting people are in Southern California. And if you're from Southern California, I apologize. But anyway, you can see some of the companies that you know and about where they're located. The Silicon Valley initially probably went much lower, like near where Facebook was, but now it's almost the whole Bay Area. When you go up north, when you see Genentech, that's biotech. There's a lot of biotech companies in South San Francisco and up that way. But down in San Jose area at the bottom of the bay, and by the way, in Wisconsin, you talk about this being Wisconsin, we talk about this being the Bay Area. And San Francisco's at the top, San Jose's at the bottom, and Oakland's over here. So that gives you just a little bit of geography. I thought this slide would be interesting. Venture capital deals, this kind of suggests what is the amount of companies that are developing, that are growing, that are getting funding in the country. And it almost looks like an earthquake map, but we call our area the epicenter of technology. It's where a lot of the things are developing. The social media networking is there, the internet, a lot of the internet companies, not only companies that are using the internet, but infrastructure companies like Cisco and Juniper Networks, the chip companies that are supplying the brains for the industry, and software companies, of course. So a lot of different opportunities in the area, and something that's very interesting for people in a lot of the majors, and we can talk about different majors beyond computer science, which is obvious, but there's other majors that have a lot of opportunities now in the Bay Area. I wanted to show this. This will help you salivate a little bit about salaries. Now, understand, this is not starting salaries, but these are average salaries. And it just gives you a relative idea on some of the companies. And I think it's really interesting when you guys look at the different companies that you understand that just because they pay a lot doesn't mean that's necessarily the whole package. There's stock, and CEO will talk a little bit about this. There's stock, there's income, there's all different things that factor into the equation. But Google at this point is one of the best paying companies, and is for some of the software skills that a number of you have as background. There's some other figures in there. Funding, 48,000 people in the Bay Area working in the internet and internet-related industry. We had something that probably you guys were just kids when the dot-com bust happened, but it took us almost until a couple years ago to recover the number of jobs that existed at that time. And we have some cycles in our area. Technology is like that. They have 8.5% unemployment. I think that really depends on what you talk about. If you're a software engineer, there's a 20% shortage of software engineers. There's 20% less software engineers than jobs that are probably available. These are average salaries for different occupations. And the blue lines of the Silicon Valley, you can see that the pay is more. And for those of you who don't know, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, you actually pay a little bit more in terms of housing. So you have to get paid a little bit more, but I think probably on a net basis, the incomes overall, the amount that you have at the end of the day is probably a little bit higher in the Silicon Valley. Companies. Now, this is a real pretty slide, and everybody says, oh, those are companies in the Silicon Valley. These are companies that have badgers working for them, typically in software business marketing. And I mention this because we're going to talk a little bit about the ability of networking with badgers. And one thing that may not be evident to you because you're undergrads is the Badger network is really amazing in terms of what they're able to do, how they're able to help you, how they're willing to get a resume in, how they're willing to put in a good word in a department for you. And the opportunity to leverage the Badger connection is really pretty easy and something that I would encourage you guys all to consider. There's also social venture companies. I think coming out of Madison, a lot of people have a very interesting social conscience, and I think they feel very guilty about taking a $100,000 a year job. So for those of you who want to take only $80,000, you can go to some of these social venture companies. And I'm kidding. Social venture companies are good. There's a number of them that are happening here, and that's a new and emerging trend in Silicon Valley. This is the number of companies that are in the Silicon Valley, well, the Bay Area right now. So there's no shortage of opportunities. There's plenty of opportunities. A lot of them are startups. Many will not be around in 5 years, but nevertheless, we'll talk a little bit about startups. CU will give a little bit of background on startups. It's a very interesting type of way to develop your career. You do everything. In a big company, and everybody looks at the big companies and they got amazing programs to do, at Google, they do your wash free, you eat 3 meals a day there. They provide transportation. You guys don't even have to do much. But the small companies, you get a lot of very good practical experience, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. Cost of living, it is expensive in the Bay Area. We're going to talk a little bit about housing, but as I said before, you do get paid a little bit better. So clearly compensating. There was a story somebody told me before I moved to the San Francisco area. The guy had worked, he was in the Army. And his first 2 years, he was in some post where he could save almost all of his money. And he saved 2 years worth of income. And then he had a 1-year assignment in San Francisco. And he said, I spent all 2 years, I had saved everything I earned the next year, and I had the best year of my life. So it's a great place to live. So there's the numbers. I don't know if you guys recognize the building on the right. There's not many pools on top of buildings in Madison, but I don't know if that number is right. You guys know how much you're paying in rent, but for that type of apartment, for I think it's a 2-bedroom apartment, the per person price would be about $1,000. Does that seem accurate, or that's wrong? That's accurate? Okay. In San Francisco, it's $2,100. I was just telling Zach, Zach knows my son, and my son just got a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment with another Badger. They are not sharing a bedroom. He has the living room. His roommate has the bedroom. He has the closet. His roommate has the door, and his roommate pays $200 more a month for the door. So that's kind of what San Francisco housing is like lately. As I mentioned to you, there's different places you can live, different pricing levels. San Francisco is the most expensive. Oakland is probably following after that. And some people commute from Oakland. San Jose is where a lot of the companies are. So we have these luxury buses with Wi-Fi that are going up and down between San Francisco all morning and all evening long, taking employees to work. There's no charge to do it. You have Wi-Fi. It takes about an hour to get to work, but they like living in San Francisco. We'll talk a little bit about housing stipends and finding apartments, but I'm going to turn it over to CU, and he can give a little bit of background on his experience.
Well, okay, yeah, let's just talk about a little bit of my experience before we jump into some of the most common career questions. I started at Intuit, which is a bigger company, in 2005. I came out here because it is the epicenter for technology. I'm a computer science major, so I thought being here would be great. I actually bought my first car, with my first paycheck. It was a Mazda 323 with 180,000 miles. I'm not sure if any one of you guys know that actually San Francisco is a very hilly city. So you can imagine driving this little car up and down the hill every day. So a few years later, I quit my job at Intuit and I joined a startup called Zapme. It's a 20 people startup, and by the time we got acquired by Yahoo, it's about 40 people. So what I want to share with you guys is that I have been in a bigger company as well as smaller company, and I've been through the acquisition process, which is sort of like the gold mine for startups. That's why you build startups. That's one of the big reasons why you build startups. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just want to quickly talk about the differences between working for a startup and established companies. Okay, and the main difference usually is between startups and established companies are money and structure. In established company, you can get paid more upfront with better benefits. So your salary is higher, your 401k matching is higher, your insurance is better. And then they usually have a good process that you can follow. It's almost like a recipe to know whether you're doing well and then also get a promotion. But you'll be playing a smaller role in your project. You know, when you are new, you might just be helping the marketing manager in some marketing materials. Or if you happen to be a product manager, you would just be working on a small little feature. Or if you're a software engineer, you might be changing the color of a button, right? But in a startup, you're going to jump in on the deep end on day one. It is very exciting, very challenging, but you'll be paid less in salary and with minimal but sufficient benefits, okay? So you still have your health insurance and all that stuff, but it is very minimal. So that's one common theme here, though, which is some of the stuff that people talk about, such as free lunch, free breakfast, right? Commuting, as well as having great equipment and Friday social company outings. It's pretty much, you know, every company is doing it now. And it's just not only established companies, startups are doing that just so that they can attract people to work in startup. So the upside of working in a startup is the potential of hitting it big. Just imagine yourself, you know, working for WhatsApp or Instagram of the future, right? So you'll be at the forefront of the internet or the technology. You'll be working with people who are really, really good, and you'll be playing multiple roles. But at the same time, you need to remember you are taking a risk. So there are definitely both pros and cons for both approaches. And it is, you know, worth asking what is important to you before making a decision. Next slide, please. Okay, so we won't be able to cover everything about interviews, but I just want to remind all of you that you are also interviewing the company, the people, and the culture. So, you know, when you're talking to them, you probably would know in your gut whether it is a good fit or not, right? So if there are any questions about it, then you should sort of dig a little more before making a commitment. And generally, interviews are pretty similar between established and startup companies. One of the major difference, though, is that you might have to show a little bit more work for startup. You know, they might give you a smaller project to work on. They might give you a hypothetical situation to sort of see how you respond to it. That is because startup has a smaller team. They want to make sure that everyone that they bring in can do multiple things. So sometimes you might have to spend a little bit more time interviewing with startup, but you know, it's like all challenges, there are a lot of silver lining, right? Which is now you can try out different things or work on a different project that you might not have opportunity to work on in school. And also the other thing is if you are interviewing with a startup, you get to see the VP of engineering or the CEO because they want to make sure that you are a good hire. But generally, you know, in today's age, they're probably your age or just a few years older than you are. And in terms of preparation, I highly suggest that all of you guys get a buddy to work on your preparation. That is because if you're only practicing, let's just say if you're a software engineer, you're only practicing in your head or writing the things on paper, you will miss the point, right? What they are establishing is whether you can work with others. So any sorts of interview, treat the interviewer as someone who you'll be working with. Work with them, right? So the only way you can replicate that experience is to work with a buddy of yours and then your buddy can then give you advice on or feedback on whether your approach is wrong or whether your interpersonal skills have to be improved. I think if you do that, that would be the best preparation that you can do. And then if you're a software engineer, make sure that you write the code on a whiteboard and sometimes type it on a computer. If you are for sales, if you're looking for a sales job, make sure that you understand what the company is selling, how they position in the market, and practice a pitch. One of the most common questions that they ask when you're doing a sales job interview is they want you to pitch the product that company is selling right on the spot. So having prepared for that, that's better. And then for product managers, you will end up solving a case study. So for people who are doing marketing right now or business management, just think about all the business case that you have to think about, right? You thought about, you probably have like a process that you go through in analyzing the problem and make some assumptions. You need to tell them that you are making those assumptions and be really clear why your answer is the way it is. Okay, so some of the questions that you asked at the end of the interviews are listed there. And I want to point out that don't just ask a question because it's a nice thing to do. Like in all interviews, training, they say, hey, ask one question at the end. But really ask a question that will sort of be like a tiebreaker. If you have two jobs that you have to pick from, whatever answer in that question that you really care about might actually make change your mind on which job to take. So I'm going to end with some tips for success that I have learned over the years. I just want to point out that next slide, please, Dave. Moving out to Silicon Valley or anywhere after graduation or during the summer is both exciting and stressful. But just remember that if you really want to find a job out here, use all your resources. We at University Recruit, Dave and I, we love to help Badgers to move out here. There's a great community out here of alumni that people help each other on, as well as a lot of events that we put up to watch Badger games and all that stuff. And then just remember that life changes is hard. So try to settle as much things as possible. Find a place to live before you move there. Know the transportation, know how to get to work and how far things would be. And then as for your job, I think one of the things that students struggle with is they don't know, back in school, what you need to get an A, right? But in your job, there's no such thing. So it is up to you and the relationship with your manager to figure out what is expected of you, right? So in the very beginning, when you start your job, meet your manager, find out what your manager expects you to do, and then check in with him or her, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to find out whether you're doing a good job. Pretty much you have a lot of control of your own success. And last but not least, enjoy the Silicon Valley. It is a beautiful place. And I'm going to pass the presentation back to Dave to talk about, how San Francisco and Madison are different. Dave?
I put together some slides just to give you some perspective. And I think a lot of you, if you've known anything about the Bay Area or San Francisco, they're going to be redundant. Some of them might be kind of interesting. But anyway, there's an iconic building in Madison. I actually worked in there in the Capitol when I was in college, which was kind of fun. But we also have a pyramid in San Francisco. The interesting thing is when I moved there, it really was obvious and evident. And now, depending on where you're coming, it's obscured by all the building that's gone on, which is really kind of unfortunate. I don't know how many of you know, but we do have In-N-Out, but we don't have Culver's. Culver's has not come to the West Coast. Custard is almost impossible to find in California right now, although we're seeing some entrepreneurs bring it. And there are custard food trucks now. So we are seeing some signs that the Midwest is coming out to California. Sunsets. You guys have amazing sunsets on the terrace and over Lake Mendota. We have some pretty interesting ones with the Golden Gate Bridge and the ocean and the bay as well. Food. We don't have fish fries on Friday night. We don't have spotted cow, and I'll tell you my spotted cow later if you're so inclined. We don't have cheese curds. So you will see that the Bay Area Badgers have all these interesting ways to bring treats back to California. And when anybody brings it back, they tend to share. When I was first living there, they didn't have bratwurst in California, not anything decent. So everybody who was going to Wisconsin would phone ahead to somebody and they'd say, we want you to freeze 3 or 4 packs of Johnsonvilles. And then you'd carry them back and then you'd invite all your friends over for a party. Bay Area, we do have seafood. Irish coffee, the first Irish coffee in the United States was served in San Francisco. We do have sourdough bread. And these are the things that you can do there. The Badger community is exceptional. It actually got a renaissance probably about 7-8 years ago. And so the Bay Area Badgers is a social group. It is primarily under 20. People find roommates, people find, so didn't you find your wife at a Bay Area Badger function? He did. He's mute.
No, I did not. It was a Packers game, but close enough.
Close enough. Okay. But there are 4 Badger bars in the Bay Area, one for the South Bay, 2 for San Francisco, one for the East Bay, and one for Marin. There's actually 5. And you can see in the middle, when there's a big game, there will be a line outside for people wanting to get into the Badger bar. We have a Crazy Legs run. We had 60 people from the Bay Area Badgers run through Golden Gate Park for that. The group on the right is the wine tour. We do an annual wine tour, which is great because it's bus. Nobody's got to drive. There is a Badger who owns a winery, and he basically goes all out to make sure that it's a fun event for the Badgers. And in the middle, you see Bucky holding a briefcase. I co-founded a group called the Badger Entrepreneurship Forum, and we have 600 Badgers who go all the way from CEOs to startup people and lawyers who support startup companies, venture capitalists, and so forth. And they're all happy to get together. The food and drink are all provided for free. And a lot of relationships and networks, angel funding has come through various Badgers to other Badgers. So it's a pretty exceptional group. Next steps. I don't know if any of you guys paid attention because, it's kind of one of those things that people don't read really far down. But CU and I have pretty much offered to help any of the Badgers who want to put together a profile to be able to refer that to you. Maybe even if you're interested, find another Badger that might have a common interest or to something you're doing, and help you, at least if you're interested in the Bay Area, find opportunities or understand more about the Bay Area. So we're willing to do that not only ourselves, but also to connect you to people. So on universityrecruit.com, there is something where you can fill out a profile. It's, 5-minute background on your courses that you've taken and different things about your background that might give prospective employers or other Badgers an idea of what you're all about. That's a little bit more detailed, specific to some of the Silicon Valley things. Contact us about companies. If you didn't see a company that you're interested on that list, I can tell you that if a Badger is not working there, there is a Badger who knows somebody who's working there. So depending on what your interest is, we oftentimes can find people to connect you to. Prepare your resume. And, I would say that your LinkedIn profile is probably more important. For those of you who have not done so already, put a nice picture on your LinkedIn profile. People actually look at that. And, when you see the hand, the invisible hand on somebody's shoulder, and that was a group picture or something like that, it's probably not as good as having something that's a little bit better. And you can actually do it with your phone with a nice background, like a plain background like this background or whatever. But do a nice picture because people actually pay attention to the pictures. List your courses. If you haven't had a lot of internships, then think about the courses that you list. Think about the projects that you did that would be relevant, because all of those things mean something to an employer. Now, if you were working at Culver's every summer, that means something. You're earning money, you're putting yourself through school, and I think people put value on that. But if you're looking for a job in some kind of technical field or software or something like that, you want to have some experience, and sometimes that comes from projects you do at school. And follow TechCrunch. Follow some of the trends that are going on. You'll find out more about the companies and the things that are happening in the Silicon Valley and technology that might help you find out more opportunities. So questions and answers, and I have to tell you that we can do a couple different things. If you're interested in asking a question, I think see you can hear if I'd use one of these things. So I'll try and turn this thing on, and if anybody has questions, you can ask me and I can either relay them to CU, or if I can answer them, I'll answer them. Anybody have questions? Yes.
So I'm just wondering, like, when you more so a question to you.
Hang on a second.
First started out coming out of.
Hang on a second. I got to figure out this technology.
Should I speak into that, or should I?
Yeah, if you can figure out how to turn it on.
Yes.
Oh. You guys are engineers, I'm not, so.
Well, Dave always have people working for him, so he's not used to doing things like this.
Hello?
Yep. So you can hear that?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I just had a quick question about you coming out of the University of Wisconsin, and you said you went straight to Intuit and then you did Zomni. Was there kind of a decision you had to make, like right out of college, whether or not you needed to explore a big company or go towards a startup, or did you immediately know that you wanted to go into a big company to kind of have that base set up before you kind of explored a smaller company?
Yeah, so that is a really good question. What I did was I pretty much applied to every job during career fair. If you don't have a job, you kind of don't have to make that decision. But during the career fair, I did specifically go talk to bigger companies first, just because they usually have a more defined process of how the whole things go, instead of going to startups. So yeah, I kind of decided early on that bigger company it's better for me, but that's not really true for some of my friends. Some of my friends decided to go to Facebook, which is a small company at the time that I was graduating. In fact, Google reached out to me when I was graduating, but I decided that having a more structured role would be better for me. But I think it's up to the personal preference. I've seen people doing well both ways, which is go to a bigger company, learn some basic skills, and then go to a startup. And I've seen people who went to a startup because they have to do so many things, then they come in to the bigger company a few years later with a higher title because they have so much more experience. So I think it is really, what I usually tell people is this. Let's just use phone application as an example. Pick up your phone, take a look at all the apps that you really like, right? And then ask yourself, who do you want to work for? What do you want to do? And then research the company. I think that will sort of like help you figure out, on top of your career path, also the particular project that you want to work on. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Yeah, is Oregon? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So my question is, I guess, to both of you guys, I'm wondering your take on starting with a large company and then moving to a small company, similar to the question that had just been asked. And the additional point I guess I wanted to bring up was, I've heard the recommendation that it's good to start with a large company because you will be doing a more specific role. And in a start, the potential negative of a startup would be as a early graduate, you might be doing too many things, and you might not learn enough depth. Meaning you'll be crimping wires, or you'll be spending a lot of time soldering, or doing a quote unquote mundane task that you perhaps wouldn't have to do if you went to a larger company. And I'm just trying to get paid on that.
Dave, can I take that question first?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. If you look at what a startup is trying to do, is they're trying to survive. So if they can get away from doing mundane tasks, they would, because you don't have enough money. I shouldn't say enough money, because the money is scarce, and then you want to do the right thing all the time. If you work in a startup, it's actually the reverse. You don't do the mundane task. You do the most important things next, right, to survive. So I wouldn't say that you would learn less in terms of depth, because at some point you need to dig down and gain a lot of depth in terms of the problem that you're solving. I think really the downside of startup, if you consider that as a downside at all, is the compensation, which is the salary that you'll be making compared to the bigger company that you're starting at. But the upside of that is if the company makes it, get acquired, if you have 0.1% of a company and it got bought for $1 billion, you're a millionaire. So those are like the pros and cons that I would actually consider working in terms of for a startup. And I wouldn't sort of say like the mundane task it's the main one. You know what I mean? Because startup just want to get to the next stage. If they cannot do the mundane task and get to the next stage, they would.
One other thing about a startup is you're going to be working a lot of long hours. You're going to have your fill-up work, and you might not have much of a life outside of work. And that's part of what goes with a startup. So you have to decide what's important at that point in your life. Any other questions? By the way, this isn't only technical questions, so anybody who's not a computer engineering, mechanical engineering, industrial engineering major, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on questions.
So coming from a technical background, I've noticed it's kind of a common trend to go working from like software engineer into something more product management, more business related. Do you see yourself doing something more business related in the future, or do you think that's something that most people do when they start out as software engineers?
Can you repeat that question again, Dave, for me? Thanks.
Try it again.
I was just wondering, coming from a technical background, you start as a software engineer. Do you see yourself going into a more product management role or something more business related in the future?
Yeah, I am actually in that transition right now. I'm working on a couple of startups. I'm the co-founder. So generally, I'm working a lot on marketing and product management stuff. And then it is actually a very common progression for technical people. There are like 3 progressions that you can have as a software engineer, right? So the first one is you stay in engineering and you become a senior engineer, staff engineer, and you do the engineering work. And the highest thing that you can get to on that front is you become a technical lead. You become an advisor, right? In terms of technical stuff. And then if you are ready to move on to management, you can become an engineering manager, which is people managing, or you can move to project manager, which is managing projects and scheduling and relationship, or you can move to product management, which is actually a big plus to be a technical person, because not only you learn the skill of understanding what a customer would want and solve that problem, you also know what can or cannot a technology do. So it is a very common progression for technical people. And as for me, I've made a conscious decision after trying out multiple roles in the past 10 years that I want to do more of the product management and business side of things. But my knowledge and experience in the technical side sort of helped me drive my decision, as well as the people whom I want to work with.
I'm going to point out something that one misconception a lot of undergraduates have is that there's a lot of opportunities for product management coming out of college. Typically, I think there's very few companies that hire undergraduate product managers. They tend to be people who have experience or have an MBA. So it's not universal. There are some companies that do a product management, but when I'm coaching students and they come out of the business school, the first thing they say is, I want to be a product manager. Yeah.
People that whom I know, they pretty much go from engineering or marketing or UI designer, and then they go to an MBA, and they come back and they sort of switch career to product manager.
It's called pivoting, and that's what people have decided that they're more interested in the business side of it than the engineering or the technical side. Pivot is usually easiest for a technical and engineering or computer science person by going to grad school.
And just another small point, which is if you're unsure, there are programs in some companies that allows you to sort of try out different things. They're called the rotational programs. You just have to talk to the companies to find out if they have those rotational programs for you. In case you can't find any of those, I would say startup, it's a one way to actually, try out all these different things, because you only have 15 people. And then, if you're the software engineer, you build the code and then you become the product manager, to improve the product, and then you become the marketing person with the CEO. So, it really depends. I think there's no specific way of how to transfer from technical to non-technical, but there's some common ways to do it.
Put up with this, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that you have been through the acquisition process. Can you give a little bit more detail about that? Just walk us through it.
Okay. So, I joined a company as a lead mobile engineer. So we were building a mobile product. The product that we were building was sort of like a way to scan your communications and then figure out, who's your most important person. If your girlfriend is Katie and a lot of Katie's in your life, if you type K, you want your girlfriend to show up first instead of, the other girlfriends that you might have. So, so that's what we built, right? So I presume most of you use Gmail, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you type in an email address, do you notice that Gmail sometimes recommends you other people to include into the email? If you do, that's a technology that we built, right? So once we build a technology and we launch a couple apps, we have a couple 100,000 people to use it. And then we raise a few rounds because we were not making money. So we go out and raise some money sort of to keep going until we find a revenue model so we can make money. And then because because of the attractiveness of the technology, as well as it is really hard to hire engineers and product managers and UI person who work well together. So it is very attractive for bigger companies to sort of like buy companies of our size, as a whole, so that they don't have to hire 40 people one by one. They know that this company is successful. They know that they have the right engineers, right marketing people, right PR people, right accountant. So they just want to, buy the whole company at the same time. So what happened is, as we are progressing in our company, people started reaching out to try to buy the company. And that usually is not a decision that one or two people can make, because there are people who actually invested into the company. So you sort of like need to satisfy the shareholders. And then also you want to take care of the people who work in the company. The reason why I say that is if a big company acquires a small company, but the people in a small company doesn't want to work there, then there's no point to go through with that acquisition. So it is actually not that clear cut of like someone show up and say, hey, I want to buy your company. And they say, sure, give me a bunch of money. It is more like, hey, I want to buy your company. What would make it work? Would your people be happy there? And all that stuff, right? And once you come into an agreement, there will be a 30 days of, you come into agreement, and then there will be like a 30 days in which, the startup cannot talk to any company, So, and then people will get interviewed. Sometimes, the VP of engineering gets interviewed. Sometimes the technical lead gets interviewed. So like I got interviewed. And that will determine the quality of the people. And then our technology is then evaluated by the other side. And then our marketing people and product managers are interviewed. And then the moment everything is settled, they will offer us a price. And then it's up to us of whether we want to take it. And then, if we can agree on the price, first the shareholders have to agree on the price. And then the cut that you get as an employee sort of has to agree with the price also. And then what they do is, if the price cannot be agreed upon because the employees are not getting as much, then what they do is they give what they call RSU, which is restricted stock units, to all the employees. So what that means is the company guarantee some stocks that will be given to the employees, over a period of 2 to 4 years, right? So if you read the news, about WhatsApp being acquired by Facebook, that's what happened. Facebook didn't pay cash to WhatsApp. They only pay cash to the investors. And then for all the engineers and the people who work at WhatsApp, they get a promised Facebook stocks that they get every single year. Do you want more detail, or is that good enough?
That was very detailed, thank you.
Yeah. It's really stressful, I can tell you that.
Well, they call that golden handcuffs. That's what the 2-year, 4-year holding period is for the engineers. So not only do they get an engineering team, but they lock them down for 2 years. They know they got that talent for 2 years.
Yeah, and it's not only the engineering team. It is the engineering team and the product manager team and the marketing team, because they have proven to work well together. So it's much easier to buy a bunch of people like that instead of just, like a jigsaw puzzle, right? Try to get one at a time and hopefully things work.
So this is actually a technical question. Actually, please forgive my raspy voice. We had homecoming this past weekend, so it's a little rough. So if you can't hear me, please let me know. I was wondering if, having worked in the technical industry, and kind of discussed or been through like the employment process, would you recommend that somebody who's trying to become or got into web development or software engineering, that they focus more on just becoming a master of one trade, or kind of just being a jack of all trades in terms of diving into different frameworks and different languages, or just focusing on one and being really, really good with one?
That is a great question. So what I would say is this: no matter what you want to focus on, make sure that you are a good computer scientist, okay? The most basic thing is you need to know your data structures, your algorithm, and everything else well. And that is because that is usually the baseline that people find, right? So if you interview for bigger companies, they put more emphasis on that kind of stuff, okay? But when you go for a startup, they emphasize that stuff just so that they know you can do all this other work. But if you know 1 or 2 particular languages, or you focus on doing back end or front end, that is actually a bonus. But you don't have to be an expert in any of those things as you are coming out from college, right? So I guess the answer then is, out of college, people doesn't have expectation that you're really good at one thing, but having that is just a bonus. But throughout your career, people do make decisions of like which way they want to go. Like for me, I am more like a client engineer, so I like to build products. Some people like to do databases. Some people like to build operating systems. Some people like to scale web services and whatnot. But, the general consensus here is you need 10,000 hours to be an expert, and you probably don't have 10,000 hours right now as a college graduates to be an expert in anything. But it's highly recommended that you pick one to learn to be good at it, and then if you have time, play around with other technology. The moment you understand the basic stuff in terms of CS, and then you understand the basic stuff in terms of how a new generation of web application is built, or how a new generation of mobile apps are built, it really doesn't matter which language that you decide to use. I hope that makes sense.
That does. Thank you very much.
I think just one more comment, I think, related to that question would be, if you really want to impress employer, and this is regardless of whether you're an engineer or marketing or product manager person is, you want to have a side project, okay? I know it is hard to do a side project when you're in school, but you have a side project or you contribute to a side project, I think that proves a lot of your skill, right? If you are a software engineer, you should have a GitHub account that you contribute code to, right? You should help out in an open source. If you are a marketing or product management person, you might want to consider, starting your own company something small to try out, you know, an e-commerce company, or join someone to try to build a startup, even though it is, I wouldn't say it's not real, but at least it is something that you try and you go through the process, and it shows that you're curious, and maybe you learn 1 or 2 skills that might be helpful in your interview. I think that it's more important than being a really expert in a particular language, because, you know, people just don't believe that you're an expert in anything when you come out from college, unless you're someone who is really special.
Hi, can you hear me fine?
Yes.
I was just wondering, as an international student, how would you go about like looking for jobs in the Silicon Valley, or like how difficult it is? Because I was at the career fair, and it's only the bigger companies that are willing to like hire you, but there are like at least like 500 other international students plus the US nationals applying for the same jobs as you are. So like any like suggestions or like opinions how to go about that? And also there was like no connections right now at all. Like yeah, it's kind of daunting.
I see. Yeah. So I was an international student, so I totally understand the problem that you went through. I wouldn't discount smaller company from hiring international students, because people are really desperate right now to hire people. Companies are really desperate right now. And usually startups who are too small won't hire international students, and that is true. But startups of reasonable size, when they want to grow from 300 people to 1,000 people in a year, they do consider hiring international students. And my tips for that is, when I was a student, I just walk around and I practice my pitch with companies that wouldn't hire me, like Lockheed Martin or Halliburton, right? And then I start talking to companies who want to hire me. And then also is the most important thing is your connection with the people who are already in the company. So if you happen to have friends in that big company who want to hire, whom you know, their recommendation will actually go much further than how you actually would do at a career fair, right? Because they can get you an interview right away if they're able to, you know, if they're willing to stand up for you. I would say that is the major piece of advice that I would give, which is get to know people who are already in a company, who are international students, who understand what you're going through, and willing to help. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, you should just focus on that, right? The reality is companies who show up in career fair in Wisconsin, just not too many. There are a lot of other companies out there. I mean, you can go to websites of other universities to sort of see which employers that are getting. You can start posting your resume on startupbird.com to sort of like just mass send your resume. I think for international students, unfortunately, it's a numbers game. And also, I'm not. What year are you right now? Are you senior or junior, or sophomore?
I'm actually a sophomore, but I'm just
that's great.
Because I'll be for internships for the summer.
Yeah. So internship and co-op, if you can get those, major boost for you to get a full-time job later. And even companies who don't hire non-US citizens or permanent residents for their full-time job, sometimes they consider international students for co-op or internship. So you should just...
Excuse me, I was going to point out one other thing. There is an immigration attorney based in Palo Alto who is a Badger, and I'm not going to let you guys overwhelm him because he does also work for a living, but he's offered to help out on some of this. But I think what CU mentioned, and probably one of his biggest advantages, was he got with a company that was a bigger company as an intern, and if he did well, then they probably were in a position to sponsor him for H-1B.
Because they sort of like, they already tried you out, you know, for 3 months. So they have more confidence of whether they want to spend more money on you or not. That's the fact.
So I know you said earlier that having a project is very important that startups value that highly, but how would you rank like the other factors into what startups value, such as like GPA, leadership experience, work experience? Like, is it worth pursuing a personal project if, say, like your GPA goes lower, it takes a hit because you don't have enough time to devote to your studies? What would you say about that?
Generally, bigger companies have a more rigid evaluation process because, just because they're big and they want to make sure that the funnel, the people that are coming through are of certain quality, even though GPA doesn't necessarily represent the quality of a student. So to answer your question, in bigger companies, they do care about GPA. They do care about the courses that you have taken just because they automate those processes, okay? And for startups, it really depends on the stage of the startup. If they are smaller, from my experience, is they are looking for a cultural fit because, it sounds so bad to say this. Working in a small startup, it's like dating someone that you don't sleep with, right? You have to see this person a lot. You hang out with them for more than 40 hours a day. So the number one thing that people evaluate is whether you're an asshole. And then if they figure out they can hang out with you for a long time, then they evaluate your technical skills, and that might not consider GPA. So that's why having a project on the side to show that you can do stuff is actually very important for startup. So I wouldn't say there's one better than the other, but it's like a combination of a mix: personality, GPA, classes that you have taken, the internships that you have, and the projects outside of the outside of school project that you have worked on.
After hearing about all the engineers that are looking to move into business after time, I was hoping you guys could shed some light about the opportunities for graduates coming out with a BBA degree, and then going forward, the opportunities for them to move up in companies as they compete with these engineers who are looking to shift to business, and also whether the compensation is similar as being above average in the Silicon Valley.
That's a lot of questions. I think I might need to get.
I'll take some of those because I'm on the business side. So first off, the business people starting out might not make as much as the engineers starting out, but there is kind of a common thing somebody told me that the people who are closer to the money make more money. So I'm not
Absolutely true.
Not true, but of course he's getting involved in. If you have stock options, that totally throws that ball out the door. I think the opportunities to go up, their businesses, they need business people, they need marketing people, they need finance people, they need all these different roles, and the opportunities are there, and those people are valued in companies too. The difference is that there's probably not as much of a shortage of those people. So it's supply and demand. You guys all, anybody took ID or business took EI, and it's basically supply and demand. So the pay per market is a little bit less. Did I answer all of them, or I missed?
Yeah, and companies do value keeping business people in the
going down the road. I can tell you that some companies, like for example, when I was, and I'm more in marketing, I remember interviewing with HP a long time ago. And they were only hiring technical engineering people for sales jobs, which I couldn't figure out because I know how to talk, I know how to network with people, I know all the sales skills really well. And this one guy sat there on my interview and he asked me to do a wiring diagram, and I look at him and I'm like, I didn't know what to say. And I think it's evolved. A lot of those companies have changed. They value business people. As Sue said, it's not just the technical team, it's the product management team, and they're oftentimes business people. So I don't think you have to worry about whether or not you're going to be valued in an organization. If you're good, if you're making important contributions, you're going to be valued.
Yeah.
All right.
And then what I would add to that is, in a simplistic view of a business is you have three pillars, right? Which is the people who are creating the product or the service. and then you have people who are doing the marketing and the promotion, and then you have people who are running the business, keeping the train running, paying the bills and all that stuff, right? As you can see, these 3 pillars, they need business people. Okay. But like what Dave is saying, and is that if you're good in any one of them, you probably will have a good chance to being kept. But my bias is always like what Dave was saying, that is, the closer you are to making money, the more sort of secure your job would be. Because, without you, they can't make money, then they're not going to fire you. So be in the service creation part or the marketing part would probably my bias, but that's just my personal opinion. And then as a business person, you can also differentiate yourself from your peers by, understanding more about the technology or the market, have an idea of what where the technology is going, where the market is going. And then, have some rudimentary technical skills so that you can run reports better so that you know how the business is doing. You can think about how to measure the performance of the business better. So there are a lot of other stuff to just differentiate yourself from other business people. So I would say that business people are highly valuable in a company.
Thank you.
What are the biggest things you learned working at a startup that prepared you for starting your own company or co-founding a company?
What is the biggest thing that I learned in the startup that helped in my current company right now?
Oh, that helped you co-found it. That helped you lead it.
People. So I realized that having toxic people in a small company, it's actually, it will actually hurt your morale as well as slow you down. So I'm very selective now with people whom I work with. I think if there's anything that I care about is the people, whether they're passionate, whether they're nice. Because if you're working with passionate, nice, and smart people, they can always learn whatever technical skills or whatever skills that they want, that we need. And if we realize that that is not sufficient, we just hire more.
So I'll close on kind of an interesting comment. One of the things that's really hard for you guys, if any of you are in your senior year or even your junior year, is going through the interview process. It's time consuming, it can be stressful, but it's like a full-time job. So you're like a D1 athlete trying to get a job. And so I think keep that in mind, but keep it in perspective, try and make it fun. Going back to the marketing role, my 3 kids are all in kind of business, even my engineering son is in business analytics. And I can tell you that each of them are doing just fine and valued in their organizations. One's in sales for IBM, one's in business analytics for LinkedIn, one's a marketing manager in Sydney, Australia for Intuit. So they're all business oriented and they're valued in their organizations, but they're valued because of the values that Wisconsin has. And I'm going to show my bias, but the work ethic that Wisconsin people have when it translates into California is amazing. I mean, you can talk to California people or the Wisconsin people who've ended up out there, and they have done very well. And they kind of look at the other people in the organization. I don't know, Steve might have a point of perspective on this, but they look at the other people in the organization and they wonder why they don't work as hard, because it's kind of that classic saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And so Wisconsin people are doing very, very well in California. Steve,
yeah, I want to echo that sentiment. And in fact, Google a year ago published an article about how they evaluate employees, and they found out that the previous way of evaluating students just based on how awesome the school is, like Stanford and MIT, did not correlate with the performance of the students. In fact, they found out that students from public schools, as well as with the right attitude, actually do a lot better a few years into Google.
A little bit of perspective on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, where my son started, he's in a rotational class of 24, and they never had more than one Wisconsin grad. And for a couple of different reasons, I think I was probably part of that influence. They had 3. So 3 out of 24, there's 6 from Harvard, and the 3 Wisconsin people are running circles around the Harvard kids. So if anybody has any further questions, we're going to put, I'm going to click the last slide that's got Steve and my email on it.
It's our personal email. So if you guys are interested or have further questions, it's kind of interesting. I always tell people, if they want to meet me and get to know me, that's great. If you want a LinkedIn connection to me, I can tell you no, unless I know you.